looking at?
The Prime Directive, the Declaration of Human Rights, the United Federation of Planets, the United Nations, World War II, the Dominion Federation War, the Art of War, the Teachings of Sara, Jesus Christ, Kalis the Unforgettable.
Namaste, Homo sapiens. Welcome to another exciting episode of PoliTreks. And we are continuing our Engaging with Picard series. This time it's the episode Nepenthe, or as I've come to learn is Nepenthe. I thought it was Nepenthe because that's how I pronounced it. And we Indians pronounce things weird, is what they tell us. Anyway, so it's Nepenthe. We'll be breaking down Nepenthe today. I have some thoughts on this episode. And my wonderful guest host who would be joining me also has thoughts. I'm very excited to introduce my guest host, but before we do that, I would love for you to know that we are part of the Trek Geeks Network, and we're really, really proud that we're part of the Trek Geeks Network. Now, the Trek Geeks Network, if you don't know, was started by two kooky old white men who decided to have a podcast network, and of course, things go great for them. But instead of being like most white men, they jumped into the minority and they said, hey, we're going to bring in a bunch of other people who can have different voices. So this big network is just not two old white men rambling about Star Trek. So now we, PoliTreks, which is basically a brown guy living in Little Rock, Arkansas, and a friendly Canadian. I say friendly in air quotes because people think he's friendly. I don't agree. But my co-host Barry DeFord and I, we talk politics, culture, and society in Star Trek. We take real world incidents on the show, and then we try to compare them to things in Trek and vice versa and see where that goes. And we are so proud to be a part of the Trek Geeks Network who listened to the previous episodes of ours. And then when we were looking for a new home, they said, hey, why don't you come join us? Which was really cool of them. Also, I would love for you to know that we are sponsored by Fansets. Fansets.com is your ultimate pin destination. We have Star Trek pins. We have DC Comics pins. I often spend in equal time looking at the DC pins and the Star Trek pins because for somebody who loves both of those, it's the perfect nerdvana place to go. Their Swamp Thing pin is especially one that I've been eyeing, and I cannot jump in and buy 1 or 2 or 5 or 20 of them. But there are some awesome pins. They are continuing their Women of Trek series this year. Just so much goodness ready to come out. I think they're also doing an entire series of Picard. The Wave 1 is already out. But in Wave 2, they've confirmed that we are getting a Jurati and a Rafi pin, which is really, really exciting. Now, just to give you an early reward, I will also tell you that if you go on fansets.com and when you're checking out after you've bought all your pins, if you enter the promo code PoliTreks, you get a neat not 5, not 10, not 12, but 15% off, you guys. You get a 15% off your purchase. Yeah, just use the code PoliTreks. That's PoliTreks. Speaking of that spelling, see, that's called a segue. You can also use that exact same spelling on Twitter, and you'll find our Twitter account. And please follow us on Twitter. We try to keep it lighthearted and positive, except for episodes like the one we have today. Hint, hint. And just follow us there. Whatever you think of the episode, our episode, Nepenthe, please share with us. We love hearing your thoughts. We are always open to debate. There are often people who come in and disagree. That is completely fine with us. Just keep it civil, keep it respectful. That's all we ask. And we will reply. We will start a fun conversation. And, more than anything, we will definitely bring you into our Trek family. We would either be it on Twitter, on Facebook, where we have a Facebook page that's not as active, but you can talk to us on the Camp Kittimer, I believe is the name of the Facebook group. I apologize, I'm not on Facebook, but I have been told that is a good place to go. Many have vouched for it on this show, so I believe all of them. Anyway, I have rambled on for long enough. I am excited to bring in my lovely co-host. I have so many things I want to share about this episode, and I'm glad I kind of got a general sense of how my guest feels about this episode. This is not going to be a pretty one for me. So I'm glad you have the yin and the yang today. But before we get into talking with our guest host, we have to jump to the main section. So on to the main section of the show, engaging with Star Trek Picard, Nepenthe. Alrighty, guys. I'm very, very excited to introduce my guest today. She is part of the Trek Geeks Network, and I've been wanting to get her on the show, and I'm excited to talk to her and break down this episode with her. She co-hosts this show along with Haley on the Trek Geeks Network, and it's the show that I call What If Trek Geeks Actually Tried to Be a Good Show? It's Trek Rewind's very own Sara. Hey, Sara, how are you?
Oh my God, what an introduction. Hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's from the heart. I've always thought that. Every time I listen to one of your episodes, I go, man, if Trek Geeks actually tried like they did in the beginning, this is how good the show would be. But clearly they've given up.
Sweet. I'll take it.
I'm glad you both are here. Before we start, hey, do you want to tell us what Trek Rewind is?
I would absolutely love to tell you what Trek Rewind is. It is a podcast that me and my best friend are doing. This came out of talking with those infamous two, Bill and Dan, about doing a podcast. And I kind of was playing around with the idea of doing something called Deep Space Wine, where we were going to watch Deep Space Nine, and because Haley had never seen it. But we just didn't get around to it. So I kind of threw around the idea of listening to the episodes they do, the See It and the Skip It's. Every time they're saying skip it, I was like, that's crap. That was such a good episode. I love that episode. Or I loved it when I was a kid, and maybe I should rewatch them. And so that was where the idea came from for our show, is we're rewatching all those See It and Skip It, starting with TNG season 1 and watching just the skip it's and kind of making a decision after a couple of cocktails, is this worth watching or not? And, it's been 50-50 so far. I fight a lot for those goofy ones. They tend to say skip it, but I love them. Some of them don't translate well, and some of them are still absolute crap, like Code of Honor. So, yeah, that's what we do. We talk about those, and we talk about our experiences going to the convention in Vegas, and we do stupid quizzes and curse and just, hang out and drink. As you can hear, that's what we do.
So tell us a little bit about Haley, your co-host. How did you and her find each other, and why did both of you decide to do this podcast?
We met probably back in 2002. We worked in retail together at a store called La Senza, which was like Canada's Victoria's Secret. And I think it started actually our conversation of being realizing that we're kindred, was that we both loved Harry Potter and we both loved Alan Rickman. And then it kind of spiraled into do you like this? Do you like that? And then I was like, do you like Star Trek? And she's like, yeah, I do. I love TNG. And so we talked about that. And then I had always, because I was really into it as a kid and I went to conventions, I dreamed of going to that convention they have in Vegas, STLV. And I was like, all right, I got to go. I've put it off enough. I've been to Vegas. I feel confident to be able to do Vegas and figure it out. And I just kind of randomly asked her one day while we were folding underwear, do you want to go to Vegas to a Star Trek convention? And she's like, yep. And that was kind of the trip that really solidified our friendship. We became best friends because we could travel well together. And as you know, or don't know, you make or break is traveling with people. So that was back in 2005. We went to our first one, and we've been pretty much inseparable nerds ever since. And I really wanted to do a podcast. She's not really big on social media and stuff, but I knew that I wouldn't have fun doing it by myself. So I kind of just told her, if I do all the work and I plan everything, will you just drink and talk to me? And she's like, of course. So that's how it works. And it's great.
That was a lovely, lovely introduction and breakdown of your show. By the way, you like Harry Potter?
I do.
After all this time?
Yeah, always.
There you go. That was what I was setting you up for. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, if you've listened to previous episodes of the show, you kind of know what we do. Mm-hmm. And just for our listeners, I will say So it's probably going to be over an hour long. So we definitely cannot break an entire episode down without spoilers. So from here on out, there will be full spoilers for episode 7, Nepenthe, and probably all of Star Trek Picard's episodes. We'll bring in references. Just make sure you've seen the episode, or if you're living on the edge kind of person who doesn't care about spoilers, just don't tweet at us that we spoke spoilers. That's why we are definitely letting you know. This is spoiler alert. From here on out, we'll have full spoilers about episode 7, Nepenthe. All right, Sara, tell me, I'll ask you 3 questions and then we'll jump into the scene-by-scene breakdown.
Okay.
How are you liking Star Trek Picard so far?
I am really liking it. And I'm really glad that I'm really liking it, because sometimes I get really excited about a show and I start watching it and I get disappointed. So I find personally that it's getting better episode by episode, and I'm a little heartbroken that there's only 3 left of the season, because I just think that it's been ramping up so good that I want more. So yeah, I really like it.
Yeah, it's interesting that there are usually shows that start off so great and then they kind of fall, and that's a bit disappointing. And then you can see that inevitably the demise of the show is coming. Mm-hmm. But when you can confidently say that a show is getting better as it goes, you can tell that they're working their way up, and you feel like you want to root for them more because they're an underdog that are learning along the way, much like all of us. So I'm glad you're enjoying the show. Now tell me, how did you like episode 7, Nepenthe?
I loved it. I did. Part of me wants to say it's the best one I've seen yet, but I still think that the previous episode was my favorite. I was really excited to see some familiar faces come back, because as soon as the trailer had dropped that we were going to get a chance to see the Rikers in space, I was waiting for them. So that was so well done. And I think it gave so much depth to the characters that we've never had before, and I couldn't have been more excited for it.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the episode.
Thank you.
I will be honest with you. This is my least favorite episode.
Really?
Yes. Not just of Picard, but of the 2 seasons of Discovery. And basically anything that came out after Beyond. This is my least favorite of all of them.
Holy smokes.
And I'll be honest with you, with our listeners, I probably will never watch this episode again.
Oh my gosh.
If I do, I will probably just fast forward it, because there are some great parts in it. Most of it on La Sirena. I really enjoyed everything on La Sirena, which is sad because the show is called Picard. But I enjoyed the parts of the episode where Picard was not in this episode. Anyway, as we go on, I will be honest. I will not try to be condescending at any time. I will tell you why I really did not like this episode and holes that I found. And I would love for you, Sara, or you, our listeners, to tell me where I'm wrong. Again, very respectfully. No, Sara, you can be disrespectful. But listeners, please be very respectful and tell me why you feel that I'm wrong. And just fill me in and give me your perspective, because that is what I'm looking for.
I just log off. See ya.
Now, before we get in to the actual episode, where you said, you kind of answered the question, but where would you rank it? 1 or 2, right? With the impossible box going back and forth. All right. Well, clearly mine is down, way down 7 for whatever numbers that we come up with. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll just do a scene by scene breakdown. We'll talk about the scenes. I'll tell you some of my problems, and then you can tell me what you think, and just feel free to interrupt me. Feel free to jump in at any point. We'll start with the first scene after previously on Star Trek Picard.
Yeah, and please be as descriptive as possible, because my memory is not what it used to be. So there's a good chance I might confuse myself with other episodes. So don't hesitate to correct me either.
Sure, I can do that. I also have written this handy dandy breakdown down. So I do have descriptions of the scenes. Anyway, the show Nepenthe opens with us going back to Daystrom, Okinawa, where we actually get the full version of the initial scene we saw, in which Jurati and O meet. We find out that in this scene, O convinces Jurati to be a plant for her aboard the Picard mission on La Sirena after she does a mind meld with Jurati, showing a future in which sins take over. This happens after they have a conversation in which Jurati says that she told Picard she is sorry that she couldn't meet the synth in person. And then she, does the mind meld where she shows, well, if that is really who you're passionate about, let me show you what happens when synths take over. We see flashes of apocalyptic visions and destruction. And then we really don't quite know exactly what we see in the mind meld, because that is kind of the nature of the mind meld. It's supposed to be between the two people. It's from one's mind to the other's mind, not really for all of us to see. But whatever she sees convinces her, and O hands her a tracker that Jurati eats. That was the scene. What did you think of it, Sara? What did you think of the acting? Just what did you think of the setup?
I'm going to be completely honest. So this is going to make me look not the brightest crayon in the box. It took me until this episode to realize that O was a Vulcan. I was like, why is she's doing a mind meld? Oh my gosh, she's a Vulcan. I wasn't expecting that. It caught me by surprise. I was really glad to get some clarification about what transpired there. I need to go back and see some of those flashes and break it down, because I know that somebody had mentioned that someone had done that and they had screenshots, and I kind of want to take a look and see what kind of stuff was. It was supposed to be pretty gory. I don't know what to think about this whole subplot. I really, really like Alison Pill in the role that she's in, and I really like her as an actress. And I'm excited that she's so layered and she's so tortured, and it's such a depth in that character, which is really exciting. I just don't know what to expect from her, and I don't know how I feel about it. It was a really good scene to kind of just, I think for me, kind of push me into like, okay, so this is where motivation came for other things that have happened. So now what? And who's going to find out, and what are the ramifications? Are
you familiar very much with the way spy agencies work? Just no. It's kind of not that dissimilar from what they did in this episode. They use a lot of brainwashing, which is kind of what a mind meld is.
Right.
And they convince the people that they want to go do these horrible things, that without them, their family, their immediate kith and kin, and those that are close to them are at risk. And on the larger scale of things, that Starfleet and all of their people and their ideals are at risk. Soviet Union comes to mind. They used to do that a lot, where they would pick these ambitious yet, naive teenagers, people going on to go into their 20s, and they would train them, and they would convince them in their doctrine that, hey, you need to go do these things in America, because otherwise the world is going to fall apart, especially in Nazi Germany, which kind of ties in with what they do in Starfleet here. I'm not saying Starfleet is Nazi Germany, but what I'm saying is, in Nazi Germany, one of the doctrines they would use to indoctrinate kids into the Hitler Youth program is they would say, hey, look at the future if these non-Christian people took over, or non-Aryan people took over, and specifically if these Jews took over. And so it reminded me a lot of that. And you're definitely not off point. A lot of people were wondering whether O was actually a Vulcan, or she is, in a way, she is manufactured herself to look like a Vulcan, but she's not really a Vulcan. Because if you remember, when we see Narissa the first time, she looks like a human. She has her human ears. And so, everybody was kind of wondering what was going on. But with this, I think we can confirm that she is a Vulcan, unless the Romulans learned how to do a mind meld. But
I like the sunglasses too.
Okay.
I do. It's so good.
The sunglasses is it's a whole other, I feel like I could do an entire episode on it, because
I would get my photo with the sunglasses at a convention. They're their own character.
Who is the only other person we've seen in all the new Trek that is kind of sensitive to light?
Lorca.
Yes. And why is Lorca sensitive to light?
He's from the mirror universe.
So my theory is that she might be a mirrored universe Vulcan.
Oh my God. I didn't even think of that. Mind blown.
That's
a good theory.
Yeah, that's my
realistic.
mind meld.
I'm
Sara today.
It's happening.
Yeah, that's where I am. Is we'll find out that Vulcans are actually all fine, but it's the mirrored universe Vulcans that have come in and taken over.
Yeah.
And kind of tie in to Section 31 stuff that they're trying to do.
Mhm.
Anyway, moving on.
Mm.
We now go into the artifact and the La Serena. We find out that La Serena is locked onto the artifact and Rafi is trying to hack into their system. And then we jump into the artifact where we see that Narissa is threatening Hugh, clearly unsuccessfully, to reveal the location of Picard and Elnor. And when Hugh refuses, she shoots a bunch of their XBs and says that it's Hugh's fault that they all died. And before the scene ends, we see her connecting to Narek, or who we now know is Kaon. He's getting on a shuttle pod, which we later find out is called a snakehead, to follow the La Serena. And as it ships out of the artifact, we see that the La Serena is released. And before they get out of there, Rios, who's very happy, is ready to leave when they all ask each other, where is the kid? Anyway, what did you think of the scene? Was it a good way to open on the artifact and where they were?
It was heartbreaking to see those previous Borgs be just slaughtered like that. Especially when you know, if you've been a fan of Hugh and his story arc, or you've been a fan of Seven of Nine and the Icheb and all these characters, that you see that humanity's come back and you're just so excited for them to have a chance to live again. And then just before they even have that chance, they're just taken out. She is such a bad, I love to hate her. Like, what a good villain. And what a scene to kind of just set the mood for the episode. It was a dark episode, and that's a huge part of it, is that scene.
Yeah, it's especially tougher to find, I think, actors and actresses who can stand up to someone like Patrick Stewart in terms of acting ability, and Michelle Hurd. And I feel like the more you see Narissa in this episode, the more you realize the actress Peyton List, she has acting chops.
Absolutely.
She can definitely take on any of those people.
Yeah.
And you'll believe that she does have a chance at fighting them. Can I brag on her gothic outfit? It's just so good.
It is.
And that's a departure from the Romulans that we saw in the past, right? They kind of had a grayish.
Yeah. With the shoulder pads and yeah. And it kind of reminds me a little bit more of Shinzon. And
the punk woman bangs that just went right up there.
The Betty bangs.
Yeah. It's like these are Section 31 and Romulans just got together, which continues my Section 31 theory. Anyway.
There you go.
So, yeah, it was a cool scene. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Now, here is a question I have. I don't know if it's supposed to be an Easter egg, but do you remember when Rafi zooms in on when she's hacking into the system? She sees these circles upon circles.
Yeah.
Just, what is that? Like, do you know?
I don't. It seems somewhat familiar now that you mentioned it, and it stands out. Do you have a theory on it?
Well, the only thing I can connect to is Soji has a necklace that is circles on circles.
Yeah.
And then she's trying to hack into the mainframe. And it seems to be that all their mainframe is written in the language of these circles. So I'm wondering if Soji's birth has some connection with the Romulans.
The symbols too that she wore kind of reminds me of the eternity. You know, I didn't think about that. I don't know. I hope there's not. I pair it with the Breaking Bad. Sometimes I found that watching that show was kind of painful, but when I look at the series from start to finish and I get that whole story arc, I'm like, that is brilliant. So I feel like for me with Picard, as much as I'm enjoying episode by episode, when I'm finished watching it and I know what the whole story is, I think I'm going to be even more excited about it, because that's when I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, the thought process that went into it. So things like what you're bringing up make a lot of sense. That if you're spot on, you're spot on. But if you're not, still a really good guess. And the Romulan tie-in and the whole fight for figuring out who the twins are and why they want them destroyed, it's still anybody's guess in a way.
Also, if you remember from the vision that we saw that Soji is in, her homeworld has two moons, which are kind of a circle on a circle. So
a lot of symbolism.
I think that they're all eventually going to connect somewhere. And even in this episode later, Riker mentions Infinity Lake. And the symbol of an infinity is kind of a circle almost joining with the circle. Maybe now I'm just getting into my
and was
hat.
the pizza he made a circle shape? And was there 2 pizzas that were circle shaped?
Probably.
With circled pepperoni on it? I mean...
Thanks for taking me down a peg. I needed that. Well done. But so I'm just wondering, like, I don't have an answer for that one. That was just, I was just thinking, what is going on? Anyway, so I did also want to mention, when somebody who's supposed to be a villain kills innocent people that they have nothing to do with, I think they become irredeemable. Mm-hmm. So I think Narissa in that way is now beyond redemption. Whatever you could do for her, you could kind of forgive her. I don't know, maybe it'll take me a while, but I could kind of forgive her incestual love for her brother. But whatever she did to the XBs, I was like, she drew the line here. Yeah. We cannot go any farther.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I feel the same way about a good villain. I love some villains and I love to hate some villains, and then some villains I just can't stand because they're real, true monsters, and they're the ones that kind of come close to the reality of what we deal with in the real world with predators and killers. And so I like my bad guys to be a little bit redeemable. So she's definitely crossed a line. She's bad. Don't like her. I don't want any kind of story where she's, she turns and she's actually good. Nope. She's gone too far. And who knows what she's done in the past. I mean, this could just be a continuation of how she's always dealt with things, and she's always been that bad. And it's just that we're seeing it now because we don't know her backstory.
Also, do you remember another Romulan villain who was kind of menacing and irredeemable and dressed in all black?
Shinzon. No, he was scrap that. No.
Nito.
Right. And isn't there people thinking that Narek, when he talks about his brother, could have been possibly referring to Nero? There was that theory that was online.
Or is Nero the father of Narek and Narissa?
Yeah, that too.
If you think about their names too, their names all have N's. And the Nar continues with Nero. Yeah. It's, again, could just be my tinfoil hat theory, but at this point, everything's on the table.
I think that's still a reasonable theory. I'll let you know when your theories are a little bit too bananas.
Okay. Thank you for doing that. I need honesty on the show. After years of co-hosting with Barry.
Okay.
It's nice that somebody wants to take this
Gloves
seriously
off.
For a change.
Okay.
All right. So from, another thing that I really enjoyed is her awesome blaster, rifle, handgun, whatever she has.
Yeah, that was a good one. It seems similar to someone that we've seen in the past, and it was a pretty, did the job, that's for sure.
And I also like her blade, her Nemesis Picard clone blade. That it was just like, I really hope that the makeup team and the props team win all the Emmys, because this show is looking incredible.
It's fantastic.
It's gorgeous. And I hope with the set design and the way it cuts to that scene where we see Narek getting into the space pod, the beautiful shot that they have of him getting into the space pod and the way they show that, I hope they win all the effects.
Absolutely. I studied a little bit of special effects makeup in my youth, and I understand exactly how difficult it is, and the fact that they do it as well as they do it and at the caliber, it's just absolutely phenomenal.
Anyway, so we found, like I was saying, the crew on the ship asks, where is the kid? And we find out that Elnor is still back, and he's trying to he finds Hugh, who's kind of been thrown away, and he's trying to help him out. And he says, I'm going to tie myself to your cause, and now I'm going to protect the XBs.
Aww. And
he tells the crew of the La Serena to kind of just, hey, you guys leave without me. I'm going to stay back.
Yeah.
Such a nice hero moment.
I like his character so much. And I didn't think I would. When I first saw him, I was like, oh, who's this guy? Like, what character? He's funny. He adds a really good little bit of humor in the background. It kind of in a Data way with that. I don't understand humor as
Fish
much.
Out of water.
Absolutely. And I like that. I find that to be really funny. And he's this episode especially, I was just really surprised by what they did with the character, and I really liked it. And him staying behind was good on him.
he is the most TNG character
Mm,
that we've seen in the show.
I agree.
Because he's a very clean-cut, good guy. He has a moral compass like Captain America.
And that hair.
Like all of him. He's
Oh
just
my God.
like that.
Yep.
It is what, 20 years old?
Probably.
Yeah.
Oh God. So young.
Way to go. Well done, genes.
Absolutely.
And humanity.
Yeah.
Anyway, so from this scene, as we find that Hugh has and Eleanor have tied each other to the lost cause, they cut to the credits. And I'm asking this to everyone. Do you like the credits?
I love them. That music, I am excited about it. And that was something I was really waiting for when the show started. I want to know what the opening is, because I really love Discovery. I love their opening theme and the music and the graphics, and Picard is just as good. Absolutely. Great music. Can't wait to see it live somewhere at the convention if the orchestra is there doing the different themes. It's so good.
I'm sure Jeff Russo is going to come to STLV this year.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Oh.
So after the credits, we go to the much talked about Nepenthe. And all right, let's get into it.
Mm-hmm.
This is not going to be pretty, you guys. Anyway, so Picard and Soji are transported into this woods-like place.
Yep.
Them arrive there. And we also actually open on Nepenthe, which looks like a very Earth-like planet, just with different shapes for continents, and it looks like Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Is the best
has
way
Nepenthe ever been mentioned anywhere in the world of Star Trek that we know of?
Not that I know of.
Okay, I haven't heard it either.
Yeah, maybe there are planets that were referred to that had regenerative properties, but this is the first time I've heard of Nepenthe. Now, interestingly, Nepenthe is a Greek term. It's the meaning in Greek is restoration or healing from heartbreak. That's what Nepenthe means.
Okay.
And it's very interesting that, of course, they would choose that name because you find out later what kinds of things the people living in Nepenthe are dealing with. So we open into Nepenthe, where Picard and Soji are transported, and they arrive in this very woods-like situation. And as they are trying to stand up and get a hold of themselves, you see a figure in the shadows aiming a bow at them. And it is revealed to be Kestra, the daughter of Riker and Deanna Troi. And she's aiming a bow at them very threateningly, but she quickly puts it down when she recognizes that it's Picard. And the self-proclaimed pacifist hunter, who's not really, but is just playing the character of a girl in the woods with her hunter-like costume and face paint. She takes them home. And on the way, Picard reveals to Kestra that Soji is Data's daughter, which shocks and kind of destabilizes the already fragile mental state of Soji. And Picard reveals to this breaking down Soji that, I know you think everything is a lie, but Daj was real, and I'm sorry, but Daj is dead. Now, what did you think of this scene, Sara?
Lots of things. I can't wait to see little girls cosplay Kestra. I just think it's such it's just important for young girls to have characters that are like this, that they can look at in science fiction. It kind of makes me think of how many girls got into archery after Katniss Everdeen came out. Like, it's just, I thought she was the last thing I expected for a child of the Rikers. But I'm pleasantly surprised with her. Great introduction, great little actress. I've seen her in The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, and she was good. I find that Picard's a little bit forgetting exactly what's happening for, he's kind of dealing with a lot right now, and to kind of lay it all on her, I think, she still needs some more time to kind of come to terms. She hasn't really even said it out loud herself. So that scene kind of was a little bit like the excitement of seeing this new character, and the name obviously is a throwback to TNG, and then kind of him just so blatantly saying, oh yeah, she's related to Data, and just be mindful that she's still kind of grasping. She just jumped through she just left a Borg ship and is on this planet. Like, slow down.
Yeah, it reminded me of people who, even with good intentions, would sometimes say something to a PTSD survivor about, hey, that person was in the Iraq war and they got their foot blown up. You know, I'm sure those things would trigger them. Now, I'm going to say some good things before we get into the bad things.
Okay.
Lulu Wilson, the actress who plays Kestra, is really good. Have you seen Annabelle Creation?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you should see Annabelle Creation.
Okay.
She kind of plays the main girl in it, and it's one of my favorites. I'm a huge fan of the Conjuring universe. I like horror movies, and Annabelle Creation is one of my favorites. It's very well done.
Awesome.
And she plays a wonderful character. You should definitely see Annabelle Creation.
Okay.
And I really liked where Soji is kind of coming to terms with everything, but she doesn't trust Picard. So she says, all this could be a lie. Just get on with the mind game. And I thought it was very interesting that she said that to Picard, somebody who has been through his own fair share of mind games, specifically like The Best of Both Worlds, which was basically a huge mind game. And also, of course, intentionally or unintentionally, The Inner Light, in which he is kind of compelled to live an entire lifetime and then comes back and realizes that only a few minutes have passed. And that must be such a mind game. All right. Now, here are where my problems with the episode starts. Okay, she calls herself a pacifist hunter. Pacifist is somebody who doesn't believe in violence or somebody who doesn't believe in harming life is how I think a pacifist is. But just minutes later, we find her very happily handing the dead body of a rabbit to Riker. Now, why would a pacifist hunter kill someone if they didn't need to?
She was being sarcastic? Ironic? I don't know. I mean, I guess that, I didn't really think about it.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, or it's not like a gotcha.
It's just I didn't look that deep into it when she kind of said, I'm a pacifist. I don't know why she would do it then. I think it's a good question to ask.
I think it's kind of a contradiction to her character and a beginning to the problems that I've seen in this episode that, I've seen it 3 times now. And,
okay.
Because I have to write notes down because it's supposed to be professional. But every time I saw it, I tried to find reasons to think why someone who calls herself a pacifist hunter and the daughter of an empath, so also she's probably part empathic. Why would she, very clearly just for pleasure, because we live in a society where there are replicators, and yet very clearly they're doing it just so they can have the real food, I guess is a way to put it. But then why would you harm a sentient being when it's just that I have so many questions about it, but the biggest one that started for me was, why would somebody who calls herself a pacifist, and clearly somebody who says, I will not use my bow on you, but the arrows are real and I'll use it if I have to, go out of their way to kill an animal?
Are we positive 100% that that animal was real, or could it have been replicated?
Well, there were no replicators that we could see of. And if you remember, Marina Sirtis, Deanna Troi, says that's one of the joys of eating food that's not from a replicator, while she hands over the tomato and she says, everything here is real. And hands, what you can clearly see is the skinned out carcass of a rabbit, because you can see the horn. I've seen that. I've paused it and I wanted to see it before I said any of these things. And they also talk about cutting out the venomous sacs, which if you think it was replicated, that is not something.
Yeah, you would have done that.
So that's the beginning of my problems with this episode. But I really, again, I'm not putting you on the spot. People can like it. People eat meat. I live in a world where I can recognize that. I just thought Star Trek was past it, because Riker himself in TNG says that they don't enslave animals for food purposes anymore.
Right.
And he's explaining that to an alien who has released prey in the ship and they're trying to hunt that alien creature so they
Mhm.
can, because they say the thrill comes from when you catch something you hunt and then you eat it. And then he says, you can't do that on the ship.
Mhm.
All our food comes from replicators. We have stopped harming animals.
Mhm.
So it was just like, please give me your thoughts. I don't mean to take this off. I would love to hear anything you have to say.
I definitely think that it was the way you kind of describe it, not properly executed with the reasoning behind it, but I understand why they did it. There's something to be said about maybe getting back to nature, and if the beginning of humanity didn't do what they're doing, they probably wouldn't have survived. And if that's what they're trying to do, is to try to be as human as possible after going through tragedy, and that's the way they do it, and I guess it makes sense. I have no problem with hunting if you don't waste an animal. I'm very much against people who are trophy hunters, personally. I think that, I don't know, I kind of want to have a little bit more story just about the planet and why they're there and what the story is. I don't think we're going to get it, but yeah, it didn't really bother me that much. I'm such a person who watches a show and just watches it to enjoy it, and I don't think too much on it. So when you pick up on these things, I totally see where you're coming from, how it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's contradictory to what Riker has said in the past. If that's their only source of food, then I get it. It's live or die. But yeah, it's a good thing that you bring up, and I can understand how you would have thoughts on it for sure.
Well, you mentioned trophy hunting, and just to elaborate, in my opinion, trophy hunting is when you hunt for pleasure, so you can you can have a head of it in your house, just so you could have it for technically, bragging or whatever reason it is, you have it for pleasure, right?
Yeah.
If you live in a society where there are replicators and you can get food without harming a sentient being, if you do harm that sentient being and you eat it just for the pleasure of it being real, isn't that also trophy hunting?
But you said there's no replicators there. So if they're on a planet that is completely free of technology and they have no other source of protein, I mean, then what do they eat? Is this for a survival thing? Is this a planet they've chosen to live at the most basic? Or is this a planet where if you just like walk down the street, there's a replicator there and they're totally just choosing to do this? So that's the question too, is how technologically advanced is this planet?
Well, we know there is technology on the planet because Riker says shields up.
Yeah.
And the entire place that they're in gets shielded up. And so based on that, if they could get shields, clearly they could get replicators, I think. Again, it's just...
Maybe it's an invasive species that they've been asked, can you do us a favor and start eating them because they're destroying everything? And, you know, if they don't do their due diligence to make pizzas with these things, they could all be destroyed. It could be its own version of a horror film. Who knows?
Now, in a show that is an hour long, a line about that would have helped, wouldn't you agree? Saying, we kill these because they're invasive and we need to kill them. So, because they haven't said that, and based on the evidence that we have, I am going to think that they did it for pleasure. And that's one of the reasons why this episode disturbs me. Our listeners know I am a vegan in progress. I kind of relapsed with dairy and eggs, but I've not eaten meat for half a decade now. It's just something I cannot do. And one of the reasons why I enjoy Star Trek is because there are honest conversations about things like this, to where you can see that most people are replicating food, but then you go to Earth where Cisco's father is boiling lobsters in his diner. You know? So it's one of the things that I always was really proud of my franchise for, that I find such a kinship to, is, hey, they're finally having a conversation about meat and animal cruelty. And it was sad for me to watch this go where it went. We'll talk about that more later. I don't want our entire episode to be about that. And I promise it is not. These are just things that I wondered about. Anyway, so on to the next scene. Picard walks up to Troi. The music is beautiful here. She's standing at the doorstep and there is no talk. As soon as he walks up to her, she hugs him. And they can They have a moment, and then Troi says hi to a shocked Soji who's standing in the back. And just, can we talk about how good Marina Sirtis is?
Oh, she knocked this out of the park. She was the one more than anybody that was so familiar in her, especially the way she played her character in this episode. It was so Counselor Troi, not Commander Troi, in my opinion. And I thought that was great. I was so excited to see her. Oh, I love her. It was so good.
There is some trivia about her wig. She's clearly wearing a wig.
Yeah.
And apparently it is a wig that she stole from the set of Star Trek Nemesis.
Yep.
And for this episode, they had to kind of bring her in on a hurry, and they didn't have enough time to find a wig. So she said, oh, wait, I have this wig. And she bought the wig from Nemesis.
Kind of makes you wonder what else she might have, hey?
Oh, they're never going to talk. I bet somebody somewhere, probably Patrick Stewart, has that Locutus outfit.
Oh, yeah.
I think is one of the greatest props. I'm sure. I remember he said that he has the flute. But we also, or maybe he has one of the flutes. I know one of them was on display at the museum, I think last year or the year before. So I wonder, but yeah, just they must have all kinds of cool props.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I bet Geordi has all his visors.
Yeah.
The bar button.
I hope so. I hope he has at least one.
What is a prop from Star Trek that you would like to have?
Ooh, I would have to say, if I'm going with TNG, let's go with, I want the fish tank that was in Captain Picard's office. Have it installed into my wall in my kitchen or something. That'd be pretty cool.
Or in your basement with the tiki bar.
There you go. Yeah. That would be pretty rad.
So from just that in that scene, I just want to talk about how good Marina Sirtis is. Anything you wanted to add about that scene?
No, it was great. It was such a, I felt that warm hug too, you know?
From here, we zoom in on Riker, who is in his kitchen cooking pizza. And then Kestra starts yelling and he says, stop yelling. And then she says, well, it's Jean-Luc Picard. And he turns around and it is Jean-Luc Picard. Yeah. And they hug. Yeah. It is such a beautiful scene.
Oh my God. I am the most unemotional person. I never cry over TV shows or anything. And I was like, oh my God, someone must be cutting onions because I have feelings. Like, it was so good. And it's like, how many decades did I wait for that? You know, it was such a reunion. It was great.
Almost 2 decades, right? Because Nemesis came out 2002.
Yeah.
And that was the last time we saw both of them together.
Yeah. And it was just the way, and I remember the trailer when the first trailer that dropped and you hear her shouting out Dad and it's like, what? And you instantly recognize that voice. I was like, okay, yeah, hands down. This could be a whole dumb musical. I'm still sold on it. I'm excited for this show. So yeah, it was such a great little reunion to, you know, see Riker just cooking away, like so out of the uniform, you know, living life, retired sort of. And yeah.
He's still in active reserve. He makes sure to remember that. He's playing jazz when he's making his pizza.
He is, yeah.
Which is, of course, we all know one of the favorite genres on aboard that Enterprise.
Makes sense for a trombone player.
To be listening to jazz, that is correct. We also see his trombone in the background in one of the scenes.
I didn't see that. Oh, I'm gonna have to rewatch it.
I believe when we zoom in on Thad's room, I think it's either Thad's room, and then they cut to the hallway in the background. I'll try to remember which actual scene it is, and I'll send it to you. But I
wonder if he ever learned how to fully play Nightbird.
I'm sure he did. At this point, he's retired. What else does he have going on? Of course, I kid. I'm sure he's doing a lot of cool things. But here he mentions that he's having trouble with the Zinti or Zinti. I believe they're a species that were mentioned in the animated series.
Okay.
I think that is kind of an Easter
Not
egg.
the Zindi from Enterprise.
I did not think so because I think he very specifically says it's Zinti.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely not the Zindi, I believe. I could be wrong. Yeah, very close. And again, here's the scene that I have my issues with. I've talked about it already with our lovely guest. I am not going to continue that, but I would love to hear from everybody else about, you know, the animal carcass and whatever all that is. Just talk to me. My personal Twitter handle is gutter_hero if you just want to talk there.
Yeah.
Or if you want to tweet at PoliTreks, do it on PoliTreks, wherever it is. I would love to hear what you thought. And
we want
just answer my question. Yeah, just answer my question. I really just would like an actual narrative. I did pose that question but I wasn't like a pissed off tweet where I was like, oh, just this is horrible. Why did they do that? And somebody said, similar to what you said, which is, there's nothing that says that they needed to kill those animals. There is nothing that doesn't say that you needed to kill those animals to keep the population under control, which I kind of think is a bad narrative, because that is also what they used in the last decade or so. It's kind of what they've used in Africa to almost drive the rhino to extinction, just so they could have rhino parts to sell. Ounce by ounce, the rhino's horn is more valuable than gold, silver, platinum. I'm just randomly mentioning it, but those are the kinds of narratives that the governments use, where they're like, oh yeah, we need to kill them to keep the population under control, which I think in this episode, had they made a line about it, I would have kind of understood it. I'm not saying I would have agreed with it, but
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, at home here on the highway, there was a grassy knoll that was overrun by rabbits, and people would drop off their pet rabbits that they didn't want, and they would populate on the highway on the side of the road, and they had to move them all to the woods. But there was a big debate about, should we do a culling of the wild rabbits, because it's to the point where it's going to be dangerous if they start zipping onto the highway, and they're destructive, and they destroyed all the grass and everything that was on there. So, but it's just a grassy knoll on the highway. It doesn't need to be pretty, but it raises a huge debate, and I appreciate both sides of it. I'm a meat eater, but I've never gone out and killed my own meat, and I don't know if I could. So that's it's pretty ironic. So it's a good one to pose, and I do acknowledge your side of it as somebody who is vegan or working towards being vegan, to be a little bit PO'd about it. Like, okay, so I thought you guys were past this, and now you're bringing it back. Like,
yeah,
you bring up fair questions.
Well, thank you for saying that, Sara. Anyway, so here Picard and Troi and Riker have a moment. They're talking to each other, and Troi says, she kind of deduces that Soji is an android because she couldn't feel anything from her. And
she's not Ferengi, so
she's not able to read her. And she says, Picard, you need a new plan. That's what Riker says. And then Troi says, one that begins with a nap. So we kind of cut to Soji, who's fresh out of a shower, and Kestra guiding her. And they both go into Kestra's room, where there's a cute bunk bed. And again, this kind of made me angry. I am doing my best to stay objective, but next to her bed, there is a clear statue of a bunnycorn, which again kind of makes me like, why do that? That's kind of like adding insult to injury. Anyway, so in this bedroom, as Soji is settling down, they talk about data, and this is where Soji learns a little more about her dad. She finds out that Data could do all these incredible things, like jump really high and run really fast, but all he wanted to do was be human. What did you think of this scene? Let me get your thoughts before I share mine.
I thought it was a nice way to bring in the character of Data without bringing in the character of Data, because everyone's so excited about seeing faces, and we saw the B4 or whoever it was in the drawer back at the Okinawa place, but this was such a more tribute to Data than I think people expected, because it really does touch on what he was about and how he wanted to be human, and to have that kind of innocent conversation. It was a child talking to someone who's also in a childlike situation about somebody who was childlike as an adult android who's trying to be human and always want to be a child. It was just really sweet. I thought it was a really well done way of talking about him, as opposed to just this cold technical conversation that was had in a meeting room or something. It was very sweet.
So I, again, have another big problem with this scene and just the general direction.
Here we go.
Sorry. I apologize that you have to be in the episode where I have a lot of problems, but I'm just being honest with you. And again, I'm just going to say things and please answer them.
Yeah.
If you think I'm wrong, just say I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But my big problem with this scene is the same problem I had with, have you seen The Rise of Skywalker?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same problem I have with a bunch of the scenes in The Rise of Skywalker. Now, let me ask you this. You know who Data is. I know who Data is.
Yes.
Kestra does not know who Data is.
No.
And Soji definitely doesn't know who Data is.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, the people that know Data seem to be compelled on forcing the idea of Data on Soji, a person who clearly has a lot more things to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And in this scene, they could have done so many things to kind of show the things that Soji is feeling. If you think about where she's been and where she just came, this could have been a scene that could have been used to give her some comfort or talk about what life is like and what, Kestra is dealing with, and just give her a different scenario instead of, in the scene, every second line is about Data. And why can't Soji just be her own? Why does she need to know and accept Data?
When you start mentioning it, it's so interesting talking to you because you see things that I don't see because I don't pay that close attention. So it gets my wheels spinning. The fact that they're kind of harping on it so much makes me wonder if it's a misdirection and that they're building this up to be that this is data, but it's not. And that'll be like a surprise at the end of this season 1 that it is. Do we know anything about what happened to Lore? And do we know for sure that in that drawer it was before? Like, do we really have all the answers that we could possibly have to make a real decision about how they're attacking this Soji character? I mean, I don't know, I feel like the android thing and the positronic net and the whole, there's so much room for debate and there's so much room for things to come out that we didn't really expect that will be like, oh my God, I wasn't, good surprises. I feel like the show would really have taken that into account, but I don't know. It's a good point that you raise about the Data aspect of it. And the
because as I was alluding to earlier, by connecting it to Rise of Skywalker, in that movie, you and I know who Palpatine is.
Mm-hmm.
And we know everything that comes with being Palpatine.
Mm-hmm.
Kay doesn't know who Palpatine is.
Mm-hmm.
Her immediate problem is to protect the Resistance.
Mm-hmm.
But all through that movie, people are telling her, you're a Palpatine. Oh, it's a big reveal. And then you have to go fight Palpatine. It's just like, again, on this show, we try to connect things to the real world. So let's say tomorrow, I find out that, I have a secret third eye, right? And I can do these incredible magical things. And I'm running and I come to your house and I say,
mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do. And then you're like, sit down, let me tell you about your father.
Mm-hmm.
And while the entire world is trying to find you and use you as a lab rat to find out why you have a third eye, let me tell you about where your ethnicity comes from and
mm-hmm.
your father's history, which really is not what the character wants at that point, I think. And also
mm-hmm.
not what the people want for her is, with PTSD survivors, you don't sit down and talk about, hey, how you were raped?
Yeah.
And then you don't do an entire discussion about
mm-hmm.
that, especially since she's just arrived into this house full of strangers
mm-hmm.
and does not even believe that reality is real. So I have so many problems with this episode. And the only reason why I bring it up is because I care about the show
mm-hmm.
and I care about the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like if they really wanted Data to be a part of the show, just make Data a part of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Why bring in this vehicle that you want to force Data with us on?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like it's the storyline with how Soji's kind of being introduced to the whole scenario, the fact that her sister is dead, the fact that she is who she possibly is, everything that's around her is finding out that she's not an adult that's grown and had a childhood, and her mother isn't her mother. I think it's rushed, and I think it's a good example of how the show is being kind of rushed. I appreciate the little bit of the storytelling in the first episodes, but she does deserve more to follow blindly this British man who's just saying, trust me. I mean, I wouldn't trust him. I don't care how kind he seems. Like, it's too much at once. And if we had 13 episodes, or if we had spent a whole episode kind of explaining to the character about more of it, or her discovering it on her own, or questioning it, it just seemed it was very rushed. And so it does cause a lot of confusion and a lot of unanswered questions about, why are you pushing this, and then why is this the way that you decided to bring back Data? There's so many other ways you could have done it.
It again, very, in a horrible way, has a connection to the new Star Wars movies, because you spent the first two movies, Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, building Rey up to be this ultimate underdog who's kind of an orphan, really has no odds and does not belong in this world. Mm-hmm. And then in the third movie, you say, oh, it doesn't matter. She's the granddaughter of this powerful villain. Mm-hmm. And in the show, what was really good that they did from the beginning till episode 7 is they show that Soji and Daj are being used by people in very different ways. And so just Soji is dealing with crazy amount of, trauma, and she has all these abilities, and you really only see, if you think about it, very, very little of it. You see it once in that Hugh scene where she's doing the autopsy, and she's talking about, why do you call them the nameless? They have names, mm-hmm. They're people. And then you see Hugh admiring her abilities, and you see her talking to that Romulan lady who's just been unclaimed, but she calls her the Senjinen. You remember the destroyer? Mm. And now mm-hmm. It feels like all that has been put aside to say, oh, she's a woman who was taken advantage of by Narek. And now she's in this place where she's Data's daughter. Where is Soji? Like, I know Data's daughter. I know Narek is taking advantage of her, but when do I get to learn about Soji? The mm-hmm. character that you're selling the show on me for. Mm-hmm. Just, there are, like, the direction that they're going in, I just have problems with. But, sorry, again. Well,
then they would have called the show Soji instead of calling the show Picard, I guess.
No, that's a good point. I agree with that. But,
yeah.
I really would love to learn more about Soji. Very selfish. Mm-hmm. I'm enjoying the show.
I would like to know more about her sister too. I mean,
yeah, because all I know about her right now is that she's Data's daughter, which is not
allegedly.
Yes, or made from Data or whatever. I don't know about her. The only thing I know about her that is not about Data is that she's scared. She's scared and she's something from Data. And if 7 episodes in, that is all I know about my second lead in a show, it's kind of sad. And this episode, they keep forcing Data, which was such a problem to me. But anyway, we see in the next scene that Troi and Picard go into Thad's room. We find out that Thaddeus Riker Troi was a son that they had that passed away due to a silicon-based virus illness that they couldn't continue the research on after the synth ban because it kind of came from machines. And we see that in this room, we see various displays, and we find out that the kid had a really wild imagination, and he invented this language called Viveen, which is a secret language that the family talks in every now and then. And we find out that Thaddeus was obsessed with the idea of homeworlds and that people had homes, and he would call them Ardani. And in this scene, what did you think of the scene? Just, I'll again throw my problems at you afterward, but tell me what you thought about the scene. You'd think he would know about Kestra and their family, right? That Thad has died.
Absolutely. I think that
why would he come to this place where, characters, these characters are dealing with so much?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that there's probably more to it than what we've seen so far, and I'm hoping that we get a little bit more to it. I don't think he went just to have a heart-to-heart, especially when you have that scene with him and Riker where he's like, thanks for not trying to talk me out of it. And, he knows what to expect from them both. He knows that Troi is going to, be the counselor that she always was. And he doesn't really need that. I don't know if it was just a matter of maybe bringing Soji there to show a softer side and to show her a bit about what he's fighting for, and that connection about your father was somebody that was really important to all of us. And that's why I'm doing this, because that's why you should trust me. Is I'm not just some guy who's out to be a hero. I'm doing it for a reason. There's a personal feeling towards this. I'm me against the world because of your father, because he risked his life. So maybe having them there to help with the backstory was part of it, because it just puts more of a human perspective on it to somebody who thought they were human and isn't. So
it's interesting that you bring up a softer side. You're absolutely right. I agree that that's something that Soji should have seen. But don't you think it would be more compelling if they had brought both of them back to the vineyard, where he does have two people that really have turned around from being Tal Shiar agents to these righteous people who are now, of course, we also know they're badass at protecting each other and their people. And also they have a dog. So I would have seen number 1 again, which I've not seen for 7 episodes. It's been 7 episodes. We only saw number 1 in the first episode. So technically it's been 6, but bring back number 1, #justice for number 1.
Absolutely. Cute ever. I love having dogs on the show. Bringing me all the dogs.
So I thought, wouldn't it be more compelling, since you're trying to tell a new story, to bring it to where you have the home ground advantage?
Maybe because he was trying to get off that Borg ship so fast, he thought, if I go home, they're just going to know where I went. They're going to follow me there. This was a quick decoy, kind of like, they're never going to find me here. Nobody knows that they're here except for me. These are close friends that I know are hiding from the real world for whatever reason. So I feel, knowing Picard, I don't think he would risk putting them into any kind of danger after what they've been through. So I think he'd have to be pretty confident with making the choice to go there, knowing that it was a very secure place to go. But does the Borg ship not have any kind of way of detecting where they went? Is there going to be a way for them to break into the Queen's room and figure out what that machine is and where exactly it went? I mean, we can all get tracing each other on the internet now. They probably still have that in the future. So
yeah, that's a convincing answer. I believe you. I hope that was really what it was. Just these holes, when I start poking them, like the show just start, much like the velvet cake that we see later on, it just starts crumbling down for me. Anyway, so from here we go back to the La Sirena again. I really enjoy the parts with all the La Sirena and the chase stuff. I love seeing Narek's little tool. Again, he's obsessed with those cubes. I don't know what it is with him and the cubes, but he keeps flipping
like a nervous
his cube.
tick.
Yeah, yes, that is correct. And he also has an ear thing, which his sister does too.
I don't like them.
They're like headphones that they talk to each other with.
I don't know.
Yeah, I never discovered
them.
Yes, he is the worst. Have you seen, by the way, I'm doing this for every show that I can possibly mention. Have you seen Penny Dreadful?
No, but I'm aware of it.
Sarah, you need to watch Penny
it.
Dreadful.
Okay.
In Penny Dreadful, Narek, Harry Treadaway, plays Dr. Frankenstein.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay, that'd be pretty cool.
And it is a really good show. It's the best Frankenstein portrayal I've seen in a long, long time. Anyway,
nice.
So next scene, we see that the La Sirena discovers this snake head that is zooming away. And they're trying to track the La Sirena, and Rios does his thing and he kind of evades the ship for a moment. And then you see that Jurati is clearly having a breakdown. She mentions, why can't we just all go home? Picard can take care of himself. And nobody cares about these effing synths. We don't need to deal with all that. And then Raffi stands up after a head motion from Rios saying, let me take you away. Let me just calm you down, just comfort you. What did you think of that scene?
Gosh. I love Raffi. I think it's such a good character. People have a hate on for that character and everything about it. I thought it was great.
I agree. It was a great scene. I just wanted to say it was a great scene. Anyway, so now we go back to Nepenthe, where Riker and Picard talk to each other while Riker puts the pizza together. This is where Soji is walking with Kestra while they're going to see the garden, in which they have the tomatoes that they need, the non-replicator tomatoes. And Riker introduces himself to Soji, and he sees her head tilt, which is the famous data head tilt. And he, again, much like Troi, just deduces the rest of Picard's mission, which is he says, that girl has some data in her and that she's an android and you're running from the Tal Shiar. And Picard says, I don't want to share more of it with you. And then Riker says, yeah, I get it. If only the ignorance of danger would really put danger away. And then he mentioned something about Soji being a teenager. He says, you're essentially dealing with a teenager. And do you know what that's like to deal with a teenager? Which, having been an ex-teenager, I know what it's like to deal with a teenager because I've dealt with one myself. What did you think of that scene?
I thought it was so real. It was such a humanizing, normal, average conversation that you don't really get that a lot in Star Trek. That's what the weird thing is about the show. The people that I've talked to that really don't like the show, and I'm fighting for the show, they're like, it's not TNG. I'm like, no, it's not. It's completely different, and it's great. And we're seeing sides of these characters that we've never seen before. They're off the ship. They've done different things, and to have these little conversations are so unique and so, I don't know, it's different, and I like it. I like that it's so different, but it's also kind of weird and kind of sad in a way too, because it's not as nostalgic as you want it to be with the uniforms and the familiar stuff that we're used to. So something like this with teenagers and all this, like Picard was never the family man, and to have this conversation even is just kind of fun. You are just the worst, Shashank. I gotta get out of here. I can't even listen to it anymore. I'm done. No, but all in good fun. I actually do have to get going because I have a dog to feed and dinner to make and things to do. This has been so much fun. I really, really don't beat yourself up about this being a downer episode. I love the conversation you're bringing to it. I want to see where this goes on Twitter. So I'm going to be watching with that gif of Michael Jackson eating popcorn. That's going to be me wanting to see how this goes down. Thank you so much for having me. And I want to come back because I want to be able to really fully embrace a full episode of this show or something else. So
I promise to have you back in an episode where I've actually enjoyed and had a good time.
The episode,
Yes.
Fair enough.
Sorry you had to bear the wrath of
God.
This episode. Yeah.
I'm going to go make some rabbit stew now just to spite.
Yeah. Just make sure it's non-venomous. You got the venom sacs out.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
Okay. I understand that you have to get going, Sara. Where can people find you on Twitter?
On Twitter, it is Trek Rewind, or my personal one is Van Island Sara, like Vancouver Island Sara. It's linked through the Trek Rewind page. The Trek Rewind is also on Instagram. So we're both places.
Sara, I cannot wait for you to join me again. Thank you so much for joining me and staying on for most of the show. Yeah. And I really, really hopeful next time, hopefully Barry will be here. And
that'd be awesome.
The full PoliTreks experience.
And full disclosure, I am going to listen to this. So if you choose to rant and say that I'm wrong about everything that we've talked about in the next parts of this episode, I'll listen and I'll know. And I'm going to call you out on it.
I would do that if I was one of the Trek geeks. Bring it on. If I was Bill or Dan, but I'm not. I'm an honest podcaster. What you listen to is what you get. Thank you so much for joining me, Sara. Until next time.
You got it. Live long and prosper.
All right, gang. Again, a shout out to my lovely, lovely guest for today. Sara, make sure you listen to Trek Rewind. It's an awesome podcast. Make sure you listen to the other shows on Trek Geeks that we have. We have Trek Rewind. We have 5-Year Mission. I'm hoping eventually by the time we get to maybe episode 40 or 45, I've had every guest on the show that is also a host on one of our network shows. I am so glad that Sara could join me for most of the episode. It's sad that she couldn't join me for the rest of it, but hey, I'm here to fill you in. Again, because I don't have a sounding board to sound off on, I will just share these thoughts and you guys can respond. Please tell me what you thought. And I would very much appreciate answers because it's the show that if you've been listening to for the last 6 or so episodes, you know I'm really enjoying Picard, but this was a really, really low point for me just because I had so many things that I couldn't stand. And maybe at this point, they're all questions. I'm not holding all of them against the show. I understand that it's part of a season-long arc. So maybe I'll get some of these answers later. But what I'm much more curious about is what you guys think and what your responses are to these questions that I'm throwing out. Anyway, let's continue on with the breakdown. So we find out that Jurati has this crazy breakdown, and then Rafi just takes it away. Auntie Rafi. I really enjoyed that scene. I loved that Rios and Jurati have Rios and Jurati have such a good relationship. You can tell that it's built on years of friendship and trust, and they've each seen each other through thick and thin. Because just with a head tilt, Rios could tell her exactly what she needed to do to help Jurati out. That was such a nice scene for me. Anyway, we went back to the Riker and Picard stuff. I think this is where what I would have been more interested in is Riker asking that question and Picard trying to answer what being with a teenager will be like, and getting some kind of response apart from, the typical scene cutaway. We cut to Troi and Soji in the garden where they talk about Thad, and we find out that Thad was obsessed with homeworlds. In this scene, again, because so far with the episode I was not having a great time, it felt like when you come out of an episode in which the central character found out about a homeworld, they just happen to run into the characters who are obsessed with homeworlds. That's such a contrived, weak story, and it's not the strongest way to have them connected to that part of the story. There are so many other better ways in which they could have done this, I think. And what they did is not ultimately what I really enjoyed. And I thought it was contrived. I thought it was weak, because let's say you're telling a story about a guy who's in $1 million debt. If the entire story leads to him just walking on the street and somebody just walks up to him and says, "Hey, I have a spare $1 million. Would you like them? Here you go." It kind of felt like that. It's not exactly like it. I get it. And I can understand it. And especially the heartbreak that Troi is going through really makes it more compelling. But the fact that they connected it in such an amateurish way by just saying, "Oh, he was obsessed with homeworlds," basically telling you by the end of the episode, one of these people will tell you where the homeworld is. Like, that seems so contrived to me. Maybe that's just me. Again, just tell me if I'm off. And in this scene, Soji opens up a little. She's talking about how she doesn't even think anything is real, and she doesn't think any of this is real. And she talks about how Picard bought her to this place, made her introduced her to some nice people, and giving her this good food. And while she's breaking that down, Picard walks up and says, "Oh, I'm really doing this to torture you," just in a jokey way. And then clearly Soji, who's having a lot of issues, just pushes Picard away onto Riker, who's in the back. And then in what could have been an absolute disaster of an episode, the scene that really spoke to me, even in spite of all the issues that I have had so far, is when Troi looks into Picard's eyes and says, "I get that what she did was wrong just now, but you had it coming." And in the scene, Troi breaks down what exactly Soji is dealing with. And she puts it in words to Picard, who himself is in such a hurry because he has so many things that he has to do. She makes him stop and reflect where Soji is mentally and what she's dealing with and why she's here, and just puts Picard in Soji's shoes, which is really so powerful. One, really, really powerful. And two, that is exactly what an empath would do in that situation. This reminded me in the best of ways to some of the TNG episodes where Troi's advice is basically what saves the ship or saves the day or saves the mission that they're on. She's doing what an empath would do. In an episode in which I've had so many issues, I basically think Kestra is exposition girl. She's there just to say things that we need to know. There's nothing more to that character than that. Albeit very well acted, very well performed by Lulu Wilson. I get the connections. I understand where they're going. But she's there to give us exposition. Everything she says is exposition. She's just telling us about the things we need to know as we go into episode 8, 9, and 10. In an episode in which Riker's entire purpose is there to cook pizza. He's just there. If you take Riker out of this episode, the episode works just as well. There is nothing that he does in this episode that is instrumental to the direction that Picard and Soji, our main characters, go in. But in such a flawed episode, Troi being here made complete sense to me. Even I, with my deeply critical, clearly not the kindest eye for this episode, even I could agree that's why Troy's here. And that's why Picard needs Troi in this episode. He needs someone who can break down how to connect with Soji and what Soji is going through. And that You Had It Coming speech just nailed it for me. I'm so glad Marina Sirtis is back in this episode, and it made total sense to me that Troi was in this episode. We go back onto the artifact where Elnor and Hugh are trying to escape and run away. And then Hugh says, we could take this entire ship down. That's what we need to do. And then Narissa walks up on them and says, oh, you've violated the treaty by talking about open insurrection, which I think is a clear nod to Star Trek Insurrection. and then a fight ensues between Elnor and Narissa. Really cool fight, well done action scene. I love that those acting chops gave way to the physical fights. Not all actors can do both. I love that Peyton List was very effortlessly ready to go. And she stood toe-to-toe with Elnor, who's we have seen so far is just nothing but a badass samurai. And they fight, and Elnor gets the upper hand for a second, but not before she manages to kill Hugh. And Hugh is on the floor, dying, and he says, I was that much of a fool again. Thanks for giving me that hope. He says that to Elnor as he's on the floor dying. It is, again, in an episode that is so flawed, this was such a powerful scene. Jonathan DeNarco coming back for the 3 episodes and being as powerful and commanding as he was on screen, and yet conveying this vulnerability that really took him back in a lot of ways to where he was in Iborg. And the way he expresses that he was that much of a fool again, thinking he could make a huge difference. And he dies thinking that he didn't, but I think he really did. You can see that in where Picard is. You can see the way he helped Soji find Picard. He helped all those XBs start a new life. He gave them names. And what could be more powerful than helping people who think that all is lost, giving them life? The tragedy of Hugh as a character is just so poetic and profound. If you think about it, Picard entering his life kind of gave him a new life, because in Iborg, it's that conversation with Picard that turns him around, and he says resistance is not futile. And he finally starts coming around from where he was. And he kind of gets a new birth. He's reborn after that conversation with Picard. And it's so tragic yet poetic that conversation with Picard on the artifact is ultimately what kills him. It's because Picard found him on the artifact. And with Picard re-entering his life, the life that Picard once gave, he unintentionally takes it away. And I'm so glad that we had Jonathan DeLarco bring his incredible acting skills. And it's so sad that his story had to end, but I am so glad that we got him for the time that we did. Thank you, Jonathan DeLarco. Way to go, man. Anyway, back on the La Serena, Jurati and Rafi have cake with chocolate milk. And clearly, Jurati is having a breakdown. She wants to tell people what is going on in her head. That is clear, but she cannot. And Rafi expresses sympathy, and she kind of deduces, intentionally or unintentionally, what is causing her all that trauma. And she says, "Oh, it's Bruce. It's Bruce Maddox. How could I not know that?" What Rafi believes, or what we think she believes, is that it's that Bruce died, and they were clearly intimate, and that is what is causing her grief. But what we think she doesn't know is that Jurati killed Bruce. And I wonder how this will all pan out, but I think Rios and Rafi are one step ahead already, given their friendship. We see a little bit of that in this episode. It's interesting where it is going to go. I'm excited to see what happens next. We cut to the dinner scene in which Riker is passing out his non-venomous bunny corn sausage pizza. Okay, I promise you guys I will get over it. Just give me some time. I'm just really irked. That's all. That they had to go out of their way to do that. But here, Picard manages to finally get into Soji. He does what Troi asked him to do. He becomes Jean-Luc Picard. He stops being Picard that we've seen, and he becomes Jean-Luc. And he becomes this vulnerable, tragic, yet hopeful person. And he shares all the things that he's dealing with. And then he says, we really cannot go anywhere without your help, and you know that, and I want to help you. And he shares why he wants to help her. He says, I was kind of just biding my time, waiting to die. And it's not that different from what he shared with Jaban and Laris. He says, but I've kind of found a new life, and I want to help you. I want to atone and make up for the things that have happened in my life with sins. Now, I also have a little bit of a problem with the scene. I'm so sorry that this is the episode that all of you have to listen to me rant about, but if you're not having a great time, it's kind of ascending or descending the way you experience and enjoy something. If you're not having a great time, it just gets worse as it goes. And the same with if you're having a good time, it just gets better as it goes. So all through the scene, I was wondering, why is Soji sharing this intimate dream vision that she learned about? That is the key to her existence, and something so deep that just hours ago she didn't even know she had. Why is she sharing it with these strangers? Wouldn't that be a much better scene? Or wouldn't that make more sense for the character if she shared that with Picard, who has a reason to be there and who she doesn't even know she can trust? And now she's sharing it with everyone. I don't know if just after spending a day, even with as incredible as Troi and Riker and Kestra are, if I could share something that so deeply connected within me, it's, again, because that is the nature of how I view things. I connect to what Soji is going through with deep trauma. And I don't know, I struggle to think of a reason why I would have shared that. Please let me know why you would think she would just share it. And isn't it also kind of ignorant of Picard to let her share these things with them, knowing that they are now putting the entire family in danger? If not from the Romulans, who kind of already know where to go, but from Starfleet and other people who might come looking for them, because Picard is technically now a fugitive, and there are deep snakes within the garden that is Starfleet. Isn't that kind of endangering Riker? And if they find out what he did, and wouldn't Picard have, I feel like Picard would have found a better way to deal with this. But all through this episode, I kept thinking, clearly they want us to keep going and they want to hurry it along. And let's do this. And let's do this at the dinner scene. And let's do this in the garden. Like, it was just like, they were just throwing things for us to learn without actually thinking about what is right for the characters. And that kind of continues to irk me. Anyway, back in the scene, Soji shares the vision and Kestra puts it in her computer and she finds out where that homeworld is and she shares that it is in the Julian system and she gives them a number. Again, exposition girl gives us the exposition that we need. Now we know where to go. You see how contrived it becomes when one of the kids has the homeworld's idea, which then leads to the other kid having this knowledge because it's her brother and she knows. How? I don't know. It's an hour long. I can't tell you everything. Just go with it. So forced. And that hurt me. And it just continues to show the holes that are in this episode. Back on the ship, Rios and Jurati have a heart-to-heart this time because clearly Rafi has done her part, but it's not looking that good for Jurati. And Rios questions if Rafi is a traitor because he thinks that it is Rafi who just disappeared mysteriously and then came back and now they're able to track her about. That was an interesting scene, and you can kind of tell that Jurati is reaching the really, really low point of her breakdown. She listens to all these people. Again, I think Rios is just dragging her along. He really wants her to start saying things before he has to say them, so he's playing the nice guy. I have to commend Alison Pill's awesome acting chops, and I think you guys should watch The Newsroom. The fact that she can bring such powerful emotion on her face and the trauma that she is dealing with. Because you can tell that after Rios questions if Rafi is a traitor and then they see that the snakehead has showed up again, you can just tell the amount of things that Jurati is dealing with are too much for her. So she replicates uranium hydride and just injects herself with it and goes into a coma. And the tracking stops because then they see that the ship has disappeared. We see Narek trying to figure it out, but he can't find it. What a powerful scene. And Alison Pill just carrying that scene. And that's really how you write good, complex characters. Because in spite of everything she's done, you cannot help but feel sorry for her. And you cannot help but blame Starfleet because they're partly responsible for what she's going through. Anyway, back on the artifact, Elnor, who has been guided by Hugh to find the SOS chip for the Fenris Rangers, manages to find it and he activates it and we leave him there. We know we've seen a similar chip before and we know who's coming because we've seen on the next Star Trek Picard. It's 7 of 9, you guys. She's coming back. I don't know what is going to happen, but I'm so glad she's back. Now, that is a return that I have to commend. 7 of 9 being in this story makes complete sense to me. From the minute she came on that scene where she says, you owe me a ship, Picard, and everything we see in the impossible, everything we see in Stardust City Rag. While that was a high point and a sensible way to bring that character, I still don't know why they brought Riker and Kestra back. That makes no story sense to me. Had it just been Troi on that planet, it would have worked just as well. It would have probably been more effective. Anyway, Picard and Riker have a little walk and talk while sipping a drink. And speaking of baggage, Riker asks, what is this new crew like? And Picard says, oh, they seem to be carrying a lot more baggage, which I think is a bit of a poke at TNG because none of the crew very famously carried any baggage because of what Gene Roddenberry wanted. You can tell that what happens in one episode, except for things like the Inner Light and Best of Both Worlds, they kind of magically forget about. And there is actually no baggage. Riker mentions that he's still an active reserve and it would take him a very good reason to bring him back, which I think is a setup for season 2. That is just me. And it's, again, in an episode that I have so many issues with, it was really powerful to see Riker and Picard talk about what Picard is going through. And he says, thank you, Will. And Riker says, for what? And Picard says, so many things. But today, thanks for not trying to talk me out of this. And it shows just how far they've come from Riker trying to talk Picard out of everything back on the Enterprise to where he says, yeah, now I know better. Which, if you're going to bring a character in, which is such a powerful scene. But again, it's unfair because you're cashing in on my nostalgia of these two people. And it's not really for the story. It's for the nostalgia and the fact that I'm sitting here and I know, oh, it's Riker from TNG. I remember Riker. He does the Riker maneuver. He puts his leg up on chairs. I know that guy. I'm glad he's saying nice things to Picard. Just, I wish there had been a story reason to see Riker. He does nothing in this episode. And as powerful as this moment is, as sweet as it is, it doesn't actually add anything to the story. Anyway, we cut back to a sleepy Soji. And as she wakes up in her bunk bed, she finds that Kestra is drawing her. I believe Kestra's tea in this episode's scene is a nod to the Sex Pistols. That's what Michael Chabon said on his Facebook or Instagram. The t-shirt that she's wearing is supposed to be in one of the languages, a nod to the Sex Pistols. That's pretty cool. Anyway, Soji wakes up, they get ready, and before Picard and Riker and Troi share a moment, and Soji and Picard get ready to go. They're standing on the threshold. Kestra comes running. Oh, before she does this, they also have a conversation about how Kestra has gone through something really horrible and she has her mom and dad, which that is what should have been the point of Kestra's character. I think it's much more compelling to talk about her brother's passing, because especially since Troi mentions that that is what Kestra is dealing with. It seems like all through the episode, they were too busy throwing all the exposition they could at her to remember that this character has some really tough grief that she's dealing with at her age. But I'm glad they at least put a line in there. That's pretty cool. In an hour-long show, they spent 30 seconds talking about, not even actually talking about it, just alluding to it. But Kestra says, I had my mom and dad, and Picard doesn't have anyone, and you don't have anyone, but you could be what my mom and dad were to me, and that could be you to each other. And so she says, I'll think about it. Leads to the farewell scene, and it looks like Lassana has made it to Nepenthe. So Picard and Soji bid goodbye to the Riker Trois, and they get aboard the Nepenthe, and we end the episode. Like I said, guys, least favorite episode of mine so far. I have so many problems with this episode. I've shared most of them with you. I would like to actually be able to edit this episode, so I'm trying to hold back everything. Again, thank you so much to Sara from Trek Rewind for being on most of the show. Life happens. People have to be places. She had to go. That is completely fine. I'm so glad I have you guys still listening. If you're still listening, as a reward, I will tell you, if you're still listening, thank you so much. I appreciate you staying with me. I appreciate you being very patient in this episode. And my ultimate goal with you guys is to just be honest about how I feel about a show, whether it's good or bad. And this was an episode that did not feel good. In spite of, it felt like a cash grab. It felt like an emotion grab. Felt like a nostalgia fest. Didn't actually add a whole lot to the story. There are a few scenes that I really enjoyed that I talked about. But please tell me what you thought. Tweet at us on @PoliTreks. That's PoliTreks. Tell us how you're enjoying the show. Tell us what you thought about this episode. Tell me if I'm wrong about everything. That is completely fine too. I just want to understand. I'm not out here trying to get Picard. I don't have an agenda. I'm just trying to understand what happened in this episode and why the choices were made and why the clearly better choices were ignored. Anyway, that's it from me and Sara on this episode. We are excited to talk to you about episode 8 that will be coming in next week. It's called episode 8 that is coming in next week. It's called Broken Pieces. 7 of 9 is back. Can't wait for that. That'll be awesome. Just anytime 9 is back, man. Just that is a character that belongs. I've said that already, but that's a character that belongs on this show's season for the story that is going. And I wish they'd have done justice to Riker. I wish they would have done justice to Kestra, but they needed an exposition girl. They threw in that character. They needed somebody, I guess, to make the pizza, so they threw in Riker. So glad we got Troi. And now, with that said, I will bid you all adieu until next time. Thanks for listening. Please be nice, guys. Please be respectful. That's all I want. I really want to understand. I'm excited for a healthy debate on this one. And until next time, live long and prosper, and onward to Star Sighting.